Daniel Rayford McGehee, one of the McGehee boys. Dan McGehee was born on September 10th, 1883, in Little Springs in Franklin County, Mississippi. He attended the public schools and graduated from Mississippi College in Clinton at 1903, and later from the Ole Miss School of Law in 1909, and admitted to the state bar for practice of law that same year. He was also a farmer and a banker, having started the Bank of Franklin in Meadville, Mississippi in 1912. He served in the state Senate and the state House of Representatives, as well as his responsibilities as a local attorney and president and primary officer, executive officer of the Bank of Franklin, until he was elected to Congress in 1935. He went into office January 3rd, 1935, and he remained there for 6 terms. In January of 46, or in 1946, his effort for re-election for a 7th term was defeated by John Bell Williams, who had come back from World War II with having lost an arm, and that's another story that we won't go into. So Dan McGehee resumed the practice of law and his agricultural pursuits and his banking, and he died at his home on February 9th, 1962, and was buried in Midway Cemetery. Congressman Dan R. McGehee was referred to sometimes in the newspaper as Smiling Dan, the winning man, congressman from Meadville, Mississippi. As I indicated earlier, he stayed in Congress for 12 years. He had some really unique experiences there, and his girls, Lena Dean, Gloria, Patsy, and Dorothy Ann, were moved from their home that we'll look at shortly in the country in Franklin County to Washington, D.C., along with his wife, Dorothy Hunt McGehee, when he was elected back in 1935. So it was a big change for the family. One of the stories that I've enjoyed hearing pieces of recently and over the years was how Uncle Dan enjoyed playing poker on Friday nights with people from various sides of the political spectrum, including with Roosevelt and later with Truman. And so he was playing with people that were his arch political enemies, but they were friends, and they knew how to be advocates for their positions without losing their sense of humanity and what their job was all about. I remember being sitting on a case in Jackson, Mississippi, and I wish I could think of his name, but the bailiff there, he was old enough that he remembered waiting on Uncle Dan at the one of those old hotels. It's one Uncle Dan McGehee always went to, and the name escapes me. We would all know it, in downtown Jackson, and waiting on him there and visiting with him. And he presented those memories as fond memories, and that Congressman McGehee was a down-to-earth, just good guy. The 3 McGehee boys, along with their sister, whose name was Lena, I'm pretty sure, were the children of William Calvin, Daddy Cal, as he was called, McGehee, and his wife, their mother, Nora Lumpkin McGehee. Nora Lumpkin and her sister, Ella Lumpkin, married brothers. Nora marrying William Calvin, and Ella marrying McGehee. Hopefully that might be the subject of another story sometime. So this particular photograph that you see in this frame is William Calvin, Daddy Cal McGehee on your left, and his wife, the mother of the McGehee boys, and daughter, Nora Lumpkin McGehee, at their home on Railroad Avenue in Bude. Bude, most of you know, but some of you may not, was basically created from nothing to be a sawmill town around 1912. And this house, I believe, was built within a year or two at most of that. And that's where they resided until they passed. And later, my parents, Mays and Dorothy McGehee, lived there following the Korean, but before the Korean conflict, I guess, also. And that's the house where I was born, and that was later known by many of you as George Price and his wife and family home there on Railroad Avenue. So William Calvin McGehee deserves a story in and of himself. He was a very far-seeing person. He was obtaining oil leases before there was ever a drop of oil ever discovered in Mississippi. And he was someone that would purchase timber and do things, and involved in helping to form one of the railroads, and just a very well-reasoned man who saw business opportunities and was not afraid to get involved and participate in those. This is a picture of the house on Railroad Avenue in Bude that would have been taken earlier than the one that you saw a moment ago with Daddy Cal and Nora in the side yard. They were older at that point in time. So what we have here closest to us is the dog, who remains unknown to me by name, Congressman Dan McGehee, his wife, Dorothy Hunt, both dressed in white. On the left and behind Uncle Dan is grandmother Lumpkin. I don't recall her first name. So she would be my great-great-grandmother, and she was the mother of Nora Lumpkin. And Nora is also dressed in white, holding a baby, presumably one of Uncle Dan and Aunt Dorothy's children, which, based on their age, I would guess would probably be their first child, which I understand would be Lena Dean. And then that is William Calvin, Daddy Cal McGehee, seated just to the left of our right of Dorothy Hunt McGehee on the porch at the top of the steps. Again, this is the house on Railroad Avenue in Bude. Here is Congressman McGehee getting in his car, and I believe that's Gloria giving her father a kiss as the gentleman waits on Uncle Dan to load in the car. And I think that's probably related to the following picture because of I noticed the attire that cousin Gloria McGehee is wearing in this photograph with her father is the same as the following frame that has she and her younger sister, Patsy McGehee Bush, in front of the family home, Rio Vista Plantation, just off the River Road out from Meadville, Mississippi. Gloria McGehee and Patsy McGehee Bush in front of their father's home, dressed alike, obviously some special occasion. They're dressed up. I can only imagine they had to feel, I don't know, somewhat cool, maybe powerful. I don't know. They're young, beautiful women. Their father is a congressman. They live in this very unique home on this 16 100-acre Rio Vista plantation. But I can tell you from personal experience that I knew both of them, Patsy much better than Gloria, but I remember Gloria quite well. And they were both just good people, down to earth. Gloria had an extensive movie history and television career in Hollywood for many years, but it didn't change who she was or where she was from. And of course, Patsy had great accomplishments herself in as a woman in general, and as the club champion of the Congressional Country Club women's tennis, and many other things. They were both just good people. So this is the approach to the Dan and Dorothy McGehee home on Rio Vista Plantation. Don't know the date of this picture, but I would guess it was at least in probably the 50s. As you came, the road turns off of River Road just past where people know the pipeline crosses as you're going towards the river from Meadville. And the road wound through a short bit of woods and classic looking old bank, especially on the left and somewhat on the right. And then it emerged into the open, and this view that you have as you approach the home, and the driveway split and made a circle and went around a clay tennis court and came back together right in front of the home. And that is seen in some of the one of the pictures that was shown earlier, and you'll see that again in some other upcoming pictures. So this was just an amazing looking place. You can see the fencing along the right side. I actually had kind of forgotten about that, and there's a big red barn that is either not in the picture or not clearly visible in the picture. Actually, several barns and other farming structures related to storage of implements and other things, as well as a number of houses off to the right and behind the house, the main house, and behind and to the left of the main house. There's a big pond out to the right that I certainly fished in a lot growing up with my daddy. And then the road that went out to the right followed around by the barns and the houses, and then went down into the river bottom. Beautiful, beautiful place. Tragically burned. I believe that was in 1967. I remember going down there with my father. It was a night that we had sleet and snow, as I recall, and the house burned completely to the ground, built out of old heart pine lumber, as houses were in that day, as well as some cypress, I'm sure. The setting here was just beautiful. It was a kind of a magical place to go to. I remember going there, and I certainly didn't have as much experience as the Scarborough children, Sandra, Dan, Sherry, and Jan. This was their grandfather's place, and of course Dorothea and her sister and Greg Grady and other members of their immediate family. This is not my immediate family, but I did go there some, and I remember when Uncle Dan died and going there and visiting with Lena Dean and Patsy and I can't remember. I think Gloria died just before. No, she died after Uncle Dan. She died in 1964, I believe. So anyway, I remember going there, and it was a really cool place. So this is the home of Dan R. and Dorothy Hunt McGehee, Rio Vista Plantation, after they updated and modified it following the way it was when the Probies had it. If you saw the other story about the Probie family, if you didn't, I encourage you to go look, because they're related and tied together in a number of ways to this story and other stories about the Franklin County. So inset, bottom left, is the way, as I understand it, the home looked when it was acquired from the Probies, William Jefferson Proby, who built this home about 1850. It looked as it did in the lower left, and then Uncle Dan McGehee, Congressman Dan McGehee, made significant changes and upgrades and improvements to it, including these very distinct awnings, canvas awnings that I remember quite well with the M displayed on them. And I don't believe in this picture that we're looking at, the addition of the room that would be to the left of the house has been made. That appears in at least one of the other photographs, the photographs of Gloria and Patsy shows that extension, and I don't believe it shows up in this one. Again, it's a beautiful home, and as far as I know, one of the few true antebellum homes in the sense that we think of them. Obviously, any house that existed in that time period that was built earlier than say 1860 or so would be antebellum in the truest sense of the word. But in terms of antebellum, quote, mansion type homes, this is the only one I knew of. There are some older homes that certainly existed and still exist, one or two. So this is a scene from, I guess scene is not the right word, but picture taken at Dan McGehee home, and that's him seated at the head of the table facing us, and to his left, our right, is his wife, Dorothy Hunt McGehee, and continuing up that side is Patsy McGehee, who later married William Bush, Bill Bush. And then this is Basil Heater, if I'm pronouncing his name right, and cousin Gloria McGehee, the sister to Patsy and Dean and Dorothy Ann, and the daughter, of course, of Dan and Dorothy. And the inset above right is a little picture from a movie that Gloria was a part of. Moving to the left side of the table from front to back is Mr. Bill Scarborough and his first wife, Dorothy Ann McGehee, also a sister to the other girls, and of course, daughter to Dan and Dorothy Hunt McGehee. Most of you who grew up in Franklin County certainly knew Bill McGehee. Not many of you probably remember, if any, Dorothy Ann. She died very young when Jan Scarborough, the fourth of the Scarborough children that she was mother of. David Scarborough is a child of Bill Scarborough by Hilda McMillan Scarborough, and he's a half brother to Dwight Morrison, also a child of Hilda, but not of Mr. Scarborough. And then next is the husband, Mr. Grady, of Dean McGehee, Lena Dean McGehee. And so they're obviously had some festive occasion. They're all dressed up, speaking with my cousin and granddaughter of Uncle Dan. And she said, no, this is not the way they would normally eat regularly on Rio Vista Plantation. And it's obviously a special occasion. And you can tell by the dress. And it appears to be likely maybe around Christmas, because if I look at the centerpiece on the table, it seems sort of Christmassy, but that's just a supposition on my part. This is a photograph of Aunt Dorothy Hunt McGehee, wife of Congressman Dan R. McGehee in front of their home on Rio Vista Plantation. You can see the very unique shell mounted on the column to your right. And she has her horse with her, and she was quite a horse person. And I don't, I believe it was Daddy as well as other people who told me of how she would ride to Meadville and park her horse by the bank and do business around town before returning home on her horse to the family property, Rio Vista Plantation. We see Uncle Dan mounted on his horse, and we can tell that this is towards the latter part of his life. And I love the story, and I'll use this opportunity to tell it because this is the sort of the other side of the congressman is Dan McGehee, the country boy, so to speak. He loved having people down and eating catfish out of the river and having people catch and cook possums and all manner of things, and just enjoyed life in the country. And Mr. Vern Sullivan told me one time that I don't remember if I think he was over at Uncle Dan's house for some reason. This was probably, I'm going to guess this was in the 40s, but I'm not sure of the timing of that. And he said it was probably after Uncle Dan left Congress, if I had to guess. And he said that he told him, he said, boy, why don't we go down to that Sugar Bowl and see those, I don't know if it was Ole Miss playing or who. And he said, well, I'd love to go, Mr. Dan. What, you got tickets? He said, no, boy, we don't have to have any tickets. I'm Congressman Dan McGehee. And so Mr. Vern went home, put on his best clothes, and came back, and Uncle Dan was dressed up. And of course, Vern was kind of like the driver too, but they were just two buddies off on an adventure. And he told me that Uncle Dan had been feeding. He had I don't know exactly what kind of car it was, but I'm pretty sure it had a rumble seat. And he said he would put corn back there and go through the fields and feed the cows. And so he had done that day, and he was all dressed up in his double-breasted suit, I think he said, and they pulled right up to and of course this was the old Tulane stadium where the Sugar Bowl was way back, and he pulls right up to it, and he says, I'm Congressman Dan McGehee, and this is my associate or something, Mr. Vern Sullivan. We're here to watch this ball game, this Sugar Bowl. And the gentleman said, well, you got tickets? And he said, sir, we don't need tickets. I'm Congressman McGehee from Mississippi, and we came to watch this ball game. And according to Mr. Vern, when he got out, it was like maybe a corn shuck stuck to the back of his double-breasted fine suit and shoes and all that. He said they escorted us right in, and we watched it from a very good vantage point. This is Dan McGehee in his law office in the back of the Bank of Franklin before it was remodeled, and my father, Mays McGehee, and I know who that is on the right, and I cannot say. They appear to be looking at some oil issue because they've got these maps spread out. That's just a supposition on my part. This is towards the latter part of Uncle Dan's life. This is going to be about 1952 or so, give or take a little bit. And they maintained their offices in the back of the bank until after Uncle Dan died. And at that time, my father built a new office over beside what's now the post office behind the courthouse. This is Congressman Dan McGehee on the left, of course, and his wife, Dorothy Hunt McGehee, on the right. And in the middle is his granddaughter, Sandra Scarborough Kramer. Sandra Scarborough at the time, and she was Miss Hospitality for the state of Mississippi, and you just can't hardly imagine anybody being any prettier than she was. And I know these two grandparents were as proud as could be, and we were all proud of Sandra and loved her. Tragedy of losing her not so long ago. And so we sort of come full circle. The three men on the bridge in the first opening scene or photograph of this presentation were the three McGehee boys. And here, the only two that are left, Hollis has passed away in 1945. And this is probably around 1954, 55, give or take a little bit. And they appear to be in the office there at the bank, in my best understanding of that photograph. And so that's Dr. James Claude McGehee on the right, and Congressman Dan McGehee, Uncle Dan, on the left. Pictures of his beautiful children behind him on top of that roll top desk. And so they're towards the end of their lives. Uncle Dan being born in 1883, and Papa, Dr. Claude McGehee, born, I believe, in 1885. I'm pretty sure. And so they're coming towards the close, and that's a place we all face until Jesus returns, and we're ready for that, aren't we? If we're not, we need to get ready by putting our faith in Jesus as our Savior.